Welcome to episode 7 of At Home at Highclere for Viking.TV. Today we're going to begin outside. I've actually come to Manor Farm, which is an old part of the estate. And this is where we keep 3 broodmares and 3 foals, who as you can see are incredibly tame and really sweet.
Large mare is called Mellow, and there's her chestnut foal Sparky, who's a glorious foal with great conformation. That filly's father is 60s Icon, who's quite a successful stallion. And here is Charlie, Dee Dee's foal. Dee Dee is a new mare we only got fairly recently. And Dee Dee's father is a brand new stallion called Decorated Knight, so we hope that both of them be able to eventually show their speed on a racecourse in a couple of years' time, which will all be great fun.
And you can see they're very tame and they like to say hello. Their coats are quite wintry at the moment, so they're all the sort of the baby foaly fluffy coats, and that will then come off and you've got a much smoother summer coat underneath. When it's cold they still have little rugs to go out in, but we've had a lovely bit of sunshine today. And they're all quite keen to come in.
They're keen to come in, but the mums are keen to come and have their evening feed. And the foals also quite like coming in this time of day as it gets a little bit cooler. This is a little colt called Leo, who, as you can see, loves being scratched, rather like a dog than a horse. But he's very, very friendly, and he's growing up fast. He's going to be a strong colt, and his father is from the United States. He's called Bobby's Kitten. His father, he's a champion in America, so we hope he's going to do great things for us. And his mum won 5 races over short distances, was very quick. So we really like this little chap. We have some fun with him in the future, we think.
This is a lovely chestnut mare called Mellow, and she's had a really cute little foal who just looks and moves so beautifully. And one of the secrets, I think to the health of the horses, making sure they're not stressed and having the best possible food. So Maggie, who helps, and Sam helps look after them, create this wonderful concoction with some of our Highclere Castle oats, which are some of the best foods that you can give a horse, mixed in with some calm and condition and cutthroat, which has got coconut in it, and lots of different turmeric. And do they have garlic, Maggie?
Yes, and Epsom salt.
Garlic and Epsom salt, so everything they could possibly
Lots
want.
of special minerals.
Special minerals. So actually, I suppose we can put this in the back.
Yes.
Should we be assistant with them?
You can cook them.
I can't cook them up. Doing it.
Get at me. Slightly
And you can see here that this is all her foal coat, and underneath she's going to be this lovely leather chestnut. Oh, isn't she lovely? It's amazing. What is she, 2 or 3 months old, Maggie?
Wait, 2.
2 months old, and look how strong. Amazingly done.
2 in a week. Come on then. Come on, Elfie. Good boy. Well, welcome to episode 7. Welcome back inside the castle of At Home. And perhaps first of all, I'd better introduce the dogs. We've got Alfie here, who is trapped in here, otherwise he is likely to escape, and Clemmy. And Clemmy's joined us because I've just taken up a new career as dog groomer. And as one of my spaniels, she's just had her coat cut off, and I think she looks pretty amazing for it. So she's coming to show off her new look this evening. Sit down, darling. Sit, sit, sit. So I'm talking to you from the music room. It's called the music room, but it's a really beautiful golden gilded room. It faces east and south. It catches so much light. You actually did see it in Downton Abbey. If you watched Downton Abbey, it was used as part of Elizabeth McGovern, Cora's withdrawing room, and they put a desk in here and they passed through it. But it's quite difficult to use for filming because the embroideries on the wall are incredibly precious, and there's some plastic perspex protecting them, and that of course reflects if you're trying to film, so they'd have to put some furniture in front of it. But perhaps the most important piece of furniture is in this room. And the most important piece of furniture in the entire castle sits in this room. So that's, I think, where I wanted to start tonight. And it's the desk of Napoleon Bonaparte. It's made by Jacob Frère. It's mahogany with some beautiful legs in metal legs. George Frère worked for Louis XVI and was a very successful furniture maker in Paris. Louis XVI, unfortunately, met his end through the guillotine in the French Revolution, and the business was taken on by George Frère's two sons, another George and his brother, and they became the Jacob Frère brothers. So this desk was made by the Jacob Frère brothers, but they made it for Napoleon Bonaparte, and the chair as well. The chair underneath the arm has got a C, which means consul. So it was probably made about 1802 for Napoleon when he was consul and not emperor. It's a beautiful chair, and it's an honour to have it here. And the desk, I'm not exactly sure how it came to Highclere. There's a plaque on it saying it came from St Helena, where Napoleon was exiled after the defeat of Waterloo, and where he died in 1821. But I'm not sure this plaque belongs with this desk. When Napoleon was sent to St Helena by the British, they sent him with an amazing suite of furniture made by a man called George Bullock, who was the preeminent English furniture maker, and he worked out of the Earls of Carnarvon's house and behind their house in Tenterden Street in London. And I think there was a desk and other furniture sent from there to St Helena, and some of that furniture was brought back to Highclere. But I think the desk was sold into the interim in the 1950s by Geordie, my husband's grandfather. So this desk was a separate acquisition. It was probably acquired by the second Earl of Carnarvon after Napoleon's defeat at Waterloo, when the British were there buying and acquiring beautiful works of art and bringing them back as curiosities and beautiful works of art to their houses in England. So it's a wonderful piece of furniture to have, and it sits in a very French, ornate, gilded room, which I think is a great place to place it now. And there's a few other pieces by Jacob Frère which are in America, and they're prized in every gallery. It's incredibly heavy. The chairs, the arms of the chair there have got sort of indentations. And my father always used to say it was because Napoleon was scratching desperately with his hands on the eve of the Battle of Waterloo, which I don't think was so, but it makes a really nice story. So this is a beautiful table, desk and chair by one of the most important French furniture makers really for the next few centuries. And it's sitting in a room which is both Italian and it's very British. So if you can swing the camera up, you can see the ceiling of this beautiful room. It was in fact painted by Francis Hayman round about between 1730 and 1740. And it depicts Athena rising. And Athena was the goddess of wisdom, and I think wisdom is always a very useful thing to have around. Funnily enough, she was also the goddess who sort of looked after horses. So it's a very neat link to looking at the Maidens and Foals this morning. It's amazing the ceilings survived. So many of the ceilings and paintings by Francis Hayman did not survive because it was burned down by fire. Some of his paintings did, but he painted many sets in Drury Lane for all the theatres, and I'm afraid all of those have since been destroyed. It was made for the earlier house. Darling, sit down. You've got enough colours. It was made for an earlier house when Robert Herbert was living here, because if you looked and saw the ceiling, we can post some pictures later, there's a lady in one part and her hand in another. And so with all of those round there, the quadrants were obviously pulled apart in order to fit a bigger room when this house was evolved from a beautiful red brick gentleman's residence, where it was in the 16th and 17th century, into the later Georgian, double-fronted, more classical, symmetrical stone house. But it is a very, very charming ceiling, and it's a beautiful setting for the desk, and in some way the gilding looks back to some of the beautiful French palaces. Sorry, there's always a moment for a little cup of tea. On the walls of this music room are some embroideries from the Malatesta family from Italy, and they were supremely successful from about 1295 to about 1500, and apparently these embroideries came from the Malatesta Palace in Rome, so they are probably 16th century. And they were hung in this room. I'm not sure whether they were hung and acquired. They were acquired by, again, the second Earl of Carnarvon, who was a great traveller and adventurer, bringing back all the works of art he loved. I guess as we send back postcards, he brought back rather more beautiful works of art. And they were hung in strips. And it's quite important that we always keep the shutters and the blinds down in this room so as not to further damage them. And in fact, the lights, the windows on this side of the castle are protected by some UV light repellents in order to help them survive for longer. So you can see there, they're describing some monkeys, and which they didn't really see. So it was exotic animals, I think is the way to put it. And beautiful muted colours set in the middle of some gold designed paintwork and gilding. In fact, this room was, again, we've done quite a bit of restoration because many of the watercolours on the 18th century shutters are completely faded. So it's been fascinating working out how we can get them restored, who could do it, how far you restore them. Because perhaps in their day, the gold would have been much brighter, much brassier in some ways. And it's really nice to, in fact, have, I think, the muted effect. But again, the watercoloured paintings have been brought to life. So you can see the beautiful designs on the shutters. And it's just the shutters of the room. So there's so much detail in Highclere. It's not just the furniture. It's also the fabrics of the wall and the textures and the whole way the room was created. I think the next thing perhaps to mention is Robert Herbert. I'd like to go back to the man who lived here, who commissioned the ceiling and who acquired and brought 39 paintings to Highclere, Geordie's however many greats ancestor. And he lived here from about the early 1700s till about 1761, something like that. So it's the whole of the Century of Reason, as they called it. He himself was very much a dandy. He loved dressing up. He created an 18th century garden all around his house, and it was regarded as one of the most beautiful gentlemen's residences in southern England at the time. It faced south, it faced east. He had beautiful painted ceilings and walls. He had great taste. He created no less than 12 follies in the gardens, with urns and statues and walks and glades. And of course, his mode of transport was the horse. Horses have stood with us with their power and their glory for centuries. It's only really since the end of the First World War that cars were really developed called horsepower for us to use to get around in. So the horse, either riding or in a carriage, was how we all travelled, whether it was across America from east to west, or from London to Highclere until the advent of the train. So they're part of everyone's life in the country, and in some ways they're a small part of ours. They're more for pleasure and racing rather than a means of transport. If you read the diaries, the 4th Earl of Carnarvon in the 19th century, his wife noted in her diary that she decided to take the curricle to drive into Newbury to pick her husband up from the railway station. I would, of course, now use the horsepower of a car to go and pick Geordie up from the same railway station. So horses have been so much with us, and all the drives and the roads in the park are made for horse-drawn vehicles, so they're the width of a carriage. And it can make it slightly awkward in today's world. So we have one-way systems because cars are bigger, wider, and people travel at somewhat higher speeds. So this estate was made for everyone to wonder and admire from horseback. And Robert Herbert in his time created a park and a nature and a landscape which he hoped people would wonder and admire, take the time out to walk and enjoy his life and his gardens here. He was quite a ladies' man too, so he thoroughly enjoyed asking the ladies round. And it's one of the first records of royalties coming here, because Queen Caroline, wife of George II, came and stayed here. So that is why we have a bedroom called Queen Caroline. And we've been most fortunate to have had subsequent royal visits ever since then. So I think now I'm going to stop and hand over to all the questions, which I can see are multiplying up behind me. And I hope you've had a little view. Darling, get down. Come on, stop this, get down. And turn to answering some of your questions, whether it's about the horses, the foals, or this beautiful room. So I think this is the first question here. Richard Marshall is asking, what is my favourite tea? Thank you, Richard. Well, we actually make there is Lady Carnarvon's afternoon tea in the gift shop, not that I'm giving it a plug, which I do enjoy, but I also love a cup of Earl Grey tea in the afternoon around about 4:30. It's such a beautiful tea. And sometimes lapsang souchong. I don't know what your favourite is, but it's a moment, and tea is a moment to sit down and just take stock of the day before finishing it up and moving towards the evening. Thank you. I've got another question here. This is from Janet in Maine. Is your spaniel a field spaniel? Yes, Clemmy is a working cocker spaniel, and she's had a litter of puppies. And I've also groomed her mother, Rosie. And Rosie was my Christmas present to my son and my husband 15 years ago. So she's about 15 years old. And she had 2 puppies, which Clementine and Winston Churchill Carnarvon. And then Clemmy's also had a litter of puppies. So they've all gone to friends and girlfriends who live near. And it's been such a joy. So I have a family of Labradors and a family of Cocker Spaniels. And I'm very pleased that I've now learned how to how to groom her and make her coat much shorter. Karen in Atlanta says, how old is your oldest horse? Well, that's a very good question, Karen. I think at the moment, most of our horses are relatively young. I had a few sadly die. They were in their 20s. And now I've started off again with their offspring or new ones that I've bought. So most of them around the age 10 or younger. One of the brood mares is probably about 10 or 11. I mean, she's had, I think, 3 foals now, so we've given her a rest for a year. And my Andalusian cross, Frankie, must be about 10 or 11 as well, but she still behaves as if he's 6 years old. Lorit from Baldwinsville, is that right? Do your horses run at Ascot? My husband would love it if they ran at Ascot. And you know, we've got such a nice 2-year-old. And she's a really pretty ginger chestnut, so relaxed, and she's in training at Richard Hannon's, and she's going so well. But of course, it's a very different racing world this season, isn't it? So I'm not sure whether she's got any chance of running it out because no horses have run. But I hope she will run next year, and perhaps she has a chance to grow bigger and stronger and be even better when she can run. But thank you. What fun that would be. Wendy from Illinois says, do you grow the oats on the estate? Yes, thank you, Wendy. That was from this morning. And one of our main crops is oats. And we've got one of the only actually special clipping and bruising machines left. It's quite a more old-fashioned or traditional way of preparing the oats for the horses to eat. And I found it so interesting doing the research about it, how to get the best protein out of them. And we actually soak them, which lets them swell. So it allows the horse's digestive system to pull out all the nutrients they want from the oats. And in fact, I found the other day some oats records of oats being grown in the hills just up there from the 13th century. So I've got snapshots of different farming records all the way through. So we're so lucky because sometimes those snapshots and glimpses back in the past give me a sort of sense of an anchor in this very strange world that we're living in temporarily, I hope, at the moment. Peggy from Florida is saying, how is your rose garden coming along? Thank you, Peggy. When we can, probably in June, we're definitely, George and I are going to go into the Rose Arbour and share it with you. At the moment, it's full of promise, but it's not quite out. And I hope another 3 or 4 weeks, and it will look amazing. It's full of promise. So exciting. Thank you. I've got a question here from Jim from Apapoka. Forgive me if I'm saying it wrong. What are the pink flowers here? Well, they are geraniums. We have a whole series of flowers in the orangery, which might be another video, and we grow them in there for the house. And at this time, we've kept all the gardeners on so that when we can start to walk a little bit again, the gardens, the grounds, the lawns are here for people to enjoy. We have space, and we've been measuring the distance within the castle. We already had one-way tours, and we can allow enough space that I hope there's enjoyment and a degree of reassurance for people touring the castle. And we're already turning to takeaway food, which we did in part, and we're going to do. We've got beautiful picnic afternoon tea boxes. In fact, we should have a competition with Viking to win one, I think. Thank you. Jean from Ohio says, how many visitors a year tour the castle? Well, in the past, we would have had perhaps 100,000 visitors a year in the castle. And obviously in the last 2 or 3 months, we haven't had anybody at all. So we earn our money, like many other hospitality and leisure businesses, from visitors stepping across the threshold. We're trying our best to put our gift shop online. We've developed a Highclere Castle app, which we forgot we had, so we're now promoting that. And Jim Carson narrates it, so I hope that's quite fun. I've always written books. I'd love to start writing my next book. And we hope that in the next month, 6 weeks, perhaps we can begin to welcome just a few people and understand how we can make them happy, give them a lovely day out, and how we can best look after them and make sure our team and everyone else is safe. So, interesting times. Thank you, Jean. I've got another question from Anne in Whitehall. What fabric is your scarf made of? Well, thank you. I think it's a silk fabric, and it's from the gift shop here. So, great question. And we're just about to put all our scarves online. My son Eddie's the photographer of the scarves. So, and he's going to also photograph some of our tiaras, we thought, for fun. What else do you want? Inspired by Downton Abbey. So that was our next thing. I just love the colours. They're so soft. And I think scarves are very useful. There's quite often a wind whistling around the castle, and that works quite well. Thank you. Wow, I have another question here This question is from Stella. Well, I love the name Stella because one of my Labradors is called Stella, but from Bloomington. Are you making honey? Well, yes, thank you. We are making honey. We've got hives, bees, wildflower meadows, and we plant the gardens thinking of all the different flowers that help the bees survive. They are such an important part of our world. So we're doing all we can, and then we sell the honey in the gift shop. And actually, we've got a beautiful wildflower meadow, which is full of the noise of insects, bees, and everything else in the summer. And then we cut the wildflower meadow and we create bottles of packets of seeds, which we sell to everybody. And they go very well. So everyone can plant a little bit of Highclere at home. I hope you'll all take a little bit of Highclere home. Thank you. There's a question here from Barry, Barry Wood from Hindhead. Have you any paintings of the Georgian house? Barry, we do have some paintings of the Georgian house. It's sketches, not paintings. It's black and white line drawings. And in fact, they were done by the architect, Sir Charles Barry. So he drew the Georgian house before he drew the Victorian commission and the different ideas that he had for the new castle for his patron, the 3rd Earl of Carnarvon. So they're absolutely fascinating, and I would love to pace out some of the rooms from the descriptions which we've got. There was always a huge great hall in the centre of this house, which I think went back to medieval times, when there was a medieval palace here 700 or 800 years ago. I've got another question here. Patrick from Portland says, when was Highclere built? Well, that's a really leading question, Patrick, because perhaps it was, you can say, the first building was built in Anglo-Saxon times in the 8th century, and it has been added on to changed new palaces like an abbey, houses, place houses, Georgian houses, and then eventually the last transformation into the castle, which is so familiar to so many people today. So there's been a home here for a long time, and it's always made me think about what makes a home, the people, the way you welcome visitors, the food, what you serve them to eat and to drink. And that's why the first colour photograph book that I wrote was called At Home at Highclere, and all those thoughts were behind it. And Downton Abbey, of course, is talking about a family, a fictional family, the Grantham family, the Crawley family, however you wish to call it, and the upstairs and downstairs. So again, it was drawing out some of those thoughts and stories of the real house. There's been a home here for about 1200 years. Lisa from Littleton says, tell me about the artwork on the door panels behind you. Well, as you can see, I think possibly some of it's classically inspired. This is a real 18th century classical room. And although it was changed and updated by, I think, the 2nd Earl of Carnarvon, they left what their predecessors did. So this, I think, belongs with the ceiling, with the painting on the ceiling, with the elaborate gilded covings which support the ceiling and which line the doors, which are also set with marble. It's a beautiful, symmetrical, peaceful room. So thank you all so much for joining me here this evening. I hope it was another window into Highclere. Thank you for joining me with Viking.TV. And I'm really looking forward to you joining me next Friday when it's afternoon tea. And I thought we'd be in the coach house where there's behind the scenes photographs and boards from Downton Abbey. And with that in mind, please join Leslie Nichol, Mrs. Patmore, who's going to be interviewed with Anne Diamond next Thursday. So please tune in for that. I'll be there. Leslie Nichols is so nice. She stayed with us here several times, as has Anne. They're great friends. I love them and they love Highclere, and I hope you'll really enjoy their stories. 7 p.m. next Thursday. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you.